I offer these every week along with a guided meditation. Just click the subscribe link below to be notified through YouTube when I post the latest recording. Or if you'd like to join us live, which would be great, just go into the description section below and follow the link along to be able to sign up for free. I want to talk with you about and build on a very well-known teaching from Suzuki Roshi. The title actually of his initial book that was really widely known, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Suzuki Roshi said, essentially, in the beginner's mind are many possibilities, while in the expert's mind are only a few. Now, there's a place for expertise. If you get on an airplane, you hope that the pilots are experts at flying planes rather than having a beginner at the controls of the 747. You don't want me flying your plane, from here to anywhere. So there's a place for expertise. There's a place for expertise. And it's interesting, a fellow named Tom Nichols, Nichols, a brilliant commentator on the current situation, has written an amazing book called The Death of Expertise, in which there's been a resistance in many quarters to undermine through disinformation and misinformation the value of genuine expertise in various areas, so that much as we would appreciate expertise when it comes to our plumber, we might want to appreciate expertise when it comes to public health, for example. Now, that does not mean dogmatic belief and pseudo-experts and all the rest of that, but, see what you think about that territory. But the point is, yeah, there's a place for expertise. There's a place for knowing what you know and trusting what you know. I like this question, I think, from Oprah Winfrey, something like, tell me one thing that you know is true. In this twirly-whirly world, we need to take refuge in what we know is true. Yeah, it's helpful to know that sometimes we're wrong and to know that sometimes we need to update our priors with new information. Okay. But still, in this world of wonders and shaky ground and shady characters, it's really helpful to have a sense of being able to trust in what you know is true. If you know it's true, that deep down you have a good heart, trust in that. Do you know deep down that you're a fundamentally good person? Work in progress, some warts and all, no halo yet, fine. But fundamentally, you're a basically good person. If you know that, that's really important. If you know that after a couple of encounters with somebody or a dozen, wow, you just can't trust them in certain ways. Jan and I did a meeting with a physician earlier today, and as a detail, someone who was the producer of my very first audio program for Sounds True, Randy Rourke, tip of the hat here to Randy, who had seen all the teachers come and go, all the bigs, right? And I was a newbie when I did my very, very first program. And at the end of it, I was, kind of insecure about how I did and was it any good? I didn't know. This was, 15-ish, 18-ish years ago. Randy said something that I've never forgotten, which is that he said, well, Rick, I've seen them all come and go. And there are two kinds of teachers, knowers and learners. And you'll be okay. And we were with a physician earlier today who is definitely an expert. But wow, was he really locked into being a knower? There was just no space for us for really learning what our own journey had been, learning that, we were pretty, educated around a particular medical issue. And you can get that feeling when you're around people who are just locked into knowing, often because they've been really rewarded in being the knower in the room. Their identity is really settled into being the knower. You can think of versions of that are gendered, dare I say, mansplaining, the knower, the all-knowing. So yes, it's important to be an expert in some ways. And yes, it's useful to trust what you know. But it's also useful to know what you're dealing with, especially with repetition. Who was it? Maya Angelou, right? Who said, when people show you who they are or what they are the first time, believe them. Or I would add, at least by the 10th time, believe them. So, and sometimes what you can know is that who you're dealing with is very identified in being a knower, and they have zero interest in learning from you along the way. So that's a kind of thing to notice here. So this is a way into this topic of what I think the great Korean Zen master called don't know mind. Always don't know. Right? Suzuki Roshi's, I think one of his later books, wonderful book of short teachings, I think it's titled Maybe So. Maybe So. And so why is it valuable to not know? Including in a Buddhist context in which typically the first element of the Eightfold Path that's listed is wise view, establishing wise view. Well, first off, it's also true that in Buddhism there are 4 primary objects of craving or object of attachment or clinging, problematic attachment, that lead to suffering. And these are named and they're worth paying attention to, right? So first object of attachment, of craving, clinging, leading to suffering, is attachment to sense pleasure, which includes attachment to ending pain, pushing away pain, holding on to pleasure. When we become attached to that and clinging to that, with a lot of add-ons, the second darts we throw ourselves, that's when trouble begins. Pleasure and pain are part of life. It's when we get attached to keeping pleasure and resisting pain, we get in trouble. Okay. Second, attachment to what are traditionally called rites and rituals. You might update that to routines of various kinds. We get attached to the way it's got to be. That's problematic. Third category of attachment is to self. Whoa, me, myself, and I. My ideas, my needs, me, to the exclusion of others. There's a place for healthy support of persons. It's when we get really caught up in identifying with the internal processes of selfing, which occur naturally, like any other flotsam and jetsam in the streaming of consciousness. It's when we identify with those particular as elements in the streaming of consciousness, alongside hearing, seeing, thinking, remembering, and all the rest of it. That's when we get into trouble. So that's the third object of attachment. And the fourth object of attachment that's problematic is view, getting attached to our views. So even in a Buddhist context that emphasizes wise view and the accumulation of wisdom, it also includes awareness about different forms of attaching to view, such as righteousness, establishing a case in your mind about others or the world, or identifying in a role as a knower rather than a learner. So there's an appreciation in a Buddhist frame of a kind of spaciousness around view. We can rest in not knowing, even as a kind of context, not so sure. Maybe that's the way to put it. Maybe so. Like, this looks like a glass of water. And yet in the back of your mind, there could be that 1% of 1% that goes, I don't know, not so sure. And so then I want to invite you into the experience of don't know. Now, don't know is a kind of knowing. You know you don't know. Don't know is not duh or dissociating or psychosis. Don't know is not denying what is obviously right in front of your nose. There's an understanding that doubt, toxic doubt, is one of the 5 primary hindrances or coverings over of true nature, hindrances to practice, toxic doubt, endlessly doubting. Am I really sure that you love me? You better reassure me again today, Or am I really sure that I'm any good? Oh, I've got to hit one home run after another today. That's toxic doubt. That's corrosive doubt. The kind of healthy not knowing we're exploring here is a kind of beautiful inner freedom. And I think Suzuki Roshi again summarizes it really well. Maybe so. Not so sure. Don't always know. So I invite you into the experience. You might say to yourself, deliberately, a little problematically, I'm sure that, and maybe clench your hand as you say it. I'm sure that. All right. What's that feel like? And you could just rewind. Oh my gosh. I can just rewind the last moments that make me squirm a little of interacting with some key people where I just kind of came in with excessive certainty, unnecessary add-on certainty. Didn't need to do that. And it's really interesting to think about people who bring a quality of gravity that's very compelling. It doesn't have that excess certainty to it. In a certain way, part of what makes it really compelling is they're not trying to shove their certainty into your mind. There's a kind of almost diffidence to it. They're not attached to whether you believe it or not. In their personal gravity, their personal dignity of the witnessing sometimes. They're bearing witnessing. I can think of different people who embody for me that quality of gravity. I think of Thich Nhat Hanh. There's a phenomenal photograph of Thich Nhat Hanh and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I think back in the 1970s, maybe, civil rights movement. And you can just see in their faces, they're both weary. They're dealing with a lot of stuff. There's compassion. Their hearts have been broken open by the sorrows they see. Thich Nhat Hanh and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And in their faces as well is a fundamental dignity. They're not trying to prove things to people. They're not trying to impress people. There's a gravity, a dignity. It's so persuasive. So back here to the experience of, like a kind of healthy humility with what we know, not proving it, not trying to shove it down the throats of other people. And internally, what's it like to not know about certain things? Like if you're attached to the success of a project you're involved with, I'm thinking of myself here, what's it like to look at and go, I don't know. I hope it turns out well. I intended it to turn out well. I think the odds are pretty good here, but really don't know. You relieve yourself of the burden of having to be sure. What a useful thing. You can apply that to quietly, even in the back of your mind, to how things will turn out for people you love. We can be very invested in how it will turn out. And that's okay. Don't you want people who are really invested in things turning out well for you rather than just sort of twiddling their thumbs on the sidelines? Okay, there's a place for that. And also, there's a place for, I don't know, quietly. It's often not skillful to say you don't know with someone, let's say, who has a health problem or who's worried about something. To just kind of drop some sort of deeply annoying, assistant professor kind of lingo, like, well, we never know anything. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, right? Is it a cat? Is it alive? Is it not? I don't know. Like, don't you want to whack them? Right? But deep down, the truth is, I don't know if this treatment's going to work for you. I don't know how many more days you're going to have. I really don't know. And there can be, I'm not advocating it, but there can be a kind of relief from the burdens of certainty to just allow, just to feel, don't know, don't know, don't know. And to be clear, it's interesting that when you say and try it, just look out to different things. That maybe are problems you're trying to solve or a conflict with another person. Maybe you're trying to figure out what in the world is going on inside them that they did that or keep doing that stuff. And then see what happens when you just kind of regard all that with that little initial thought. This kind of a buffer creates freedom and space. Don't know. What you might find, I often find this, is that when you declare for yourself, you claim for yourself the right to not know for sure, don't know. Action can follow. Don't know. And I'm going to do what I think is the best odds thing next, which might be just waiting and not knowing. In other words, action can follow easily, don't know. Don't know often sort of clears the circuits, clears the field. It's like back in the day with the Etch-a-Sketch. Remember Etch-a-Sketch? You write on it, you draw on it, magnetized, and then you shake it, and the little particles that stick to the screen drop. It's like, don't know, shakes the Etch-a-Sketch of the mind, clears the field into an openness, a blank canvas, into which then you can paint the next moment of pretty confident knowing or the next moment of, reasonably effective action. Don't know. A detail about the neurology of attention having to do with don't know. And I appreciate what you're saying there, Brenda, and it's really right. Sometimes it's not skillful to tell other people, don't know. I'm just naming this as an option for when it's useful. Don't know. And I think actually in our culture, which is so much about having to always know what's on TV tonight, right? What's for dinner? What's the answer to the demand? It's like so many things come at us demanding a response. It's such a beautiful shock absorber or buffer to be able to go, don't know. The economy, don't know. The president, don't know. The midterms, the next election, don't know. Not out of ignorance or stupidity or withdrawal, but more like a kind of existential inner freedom. Don't know. Now, attention. So, fasten your seatbelts here. Attention has these three elements to it that are occurring in sequence again and again and again. They're called alerting, orienting, and responding. So imagine that you are, a human living 10,000 years ago, and you're walking down a path, and suddenly there's a sound. And in the first quarter second, your brain is just registering, something has changed. Something has happened. You don't know what it is, you don't know where it is, you don't know how to respond to it, but you're alerted to it. Okay? Technically, when that alerting happens, it's a kind of a circuit breaker in the brain, and previous ruminations and activities and mind wandering and task-oriented problem solving, blip, it gets pushed to the side for a more global, holistic, nonverbal, preverbal alerting. Something has changed. Okay? And then comes orienting to typically to where it is and what it is. So you heard that sound, you're walking down a path in the jungle or the woods, and then you orient to it, and you establish it that it's to your left, it's kind of far away, so you have another half second to think about it, to figure it out, and you realize that it's the sound of wind in the trees, not the identifiable sound of a predator approaching. What it is and where it is and what it is. So it's being categorized. And then in the third step, there's the responding phase where attention gathers resources like, on the one hand, do I need to look for a stick to defend myself with against this potential predator? Or can I, just kind of relax my body and I don't need to respond to it in that way? That sequence is at the front end of the processing stream continuously. And what's very interesting is that that processing stream tracks in Buddhism what are called the aggregates, these 5 piles. The root of the word for them is piles. It's kind of a jaundiced view of our own consciousness, these piles. So there's the form aggregate, which is matter and the bare perception of matter. Then there's the perception aggregate, what is it, categorizing things. Then there's the hedonic tone aggregate, sometimes called the feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Do I like it? Do I dislike it? Am I indifferent to it? Then there's all the other stuff floating around in the stream of consciousness called the formations or volitional formations. And then there's the field of awareness or consciousness altogether. And in the Buddhist frame, these 5 aggregates are being constructed continuously. And therefore, like all constructed conditioned phenomena, they arise and pass away. All right, you could look up more about the aggregates. I'm not going to do a big deal, but I'm going to point out, how does that sequence of attending, orienting, and, alerting, the sequence of attention, alerting, orienting, and responding, how does that track to the aggregates? Well, the front end of the processing stream tracks to, in particular, the form aggregate, of just bare apprehension of aspects of reality, and the perception aggregate. What is it and where is it with the beginnings of the hedonic tone? Do I dislike it? Oh, it might be a predator. Or do I like it? Oh, it's just the pleasant sound of the wind through the leaves. Now I'm giving you some classic, quite analytic Buddhism. So don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. But it's really useful because here's the takeaway. When we're resting in the alerting phase of the attentional stream, when we're resting in the alerting phase, we're resting there prior to orienting, prior to the perception and hedonic tone aggregates. We don't know yet. All we know is something has changed. And of course, reality is continuously changing, impermanence. And the more that we can abide in the front end of the processing stream, as close as we can get to the front end of now, the leading edge of now, the more that we rest there in the present, prior to knowing, prior to categorizing, prior to liking or disliking, prior to me, myself, and I, the more that we rest there, we are living before suffering can occur. Because suffering rests in the 4th aggregate, the formations, the reactions of various kind, saturated with self. Wow. I think this is partly why great teachers like Ram Dass talk about be here now. You find proverbs like that in early Buddhism. Those who rest in the present have a serene complexion. You see? So if you're resting and alerting, something's happening, don't know what it is. Allowing yourself not to know, you can rest in the present in this way. So to repeat briefly, experientially, the more that you can rest in not knowing, the more that will bring you into the front end of the processing stream and the present altogether. And the more that we can rest in the present, alerting the new, releasing the new, the more that we do that, wow, just try it. You kind of start smiling because you're living, of course, in the emergent creation of reality, as time expands, bringing us always into the next, leaving the past behind. And no worries. There may be stuff to deal with, but the mishigas in the mind, the nangling and worrying and all that, falls away. The more that we're in the alerting, not knowing, present moment, or the alerting and not knowing aspects of being in the present moment. That's what I'm trying to say. That's really powerful, isn't it? And it's available to us continuously in the present moment. And and skillful means for abiding in this way, that's right, is having curiosity, letting it be. I see you, Sarah. I see your comment there. We'll get to you. Nice try. I like that. Sarah at 7:19, 19 past. She's, I think, referring to the classic Bahia Sutta, which the Buddha said to Bahia, basically, you should practice such that in the hearing and the seeing and in the sensing and the thinking, there is only hearing, seeing, sensing, and thinking in the present, right? Without all the add-ons. And Bahia wandered off and was in a daze, I guess, and got killed by an angry cow. Okay, so bringing it home. The practical benefits of not knowing and beginner's mind. Try it. See what that's like. And return to knowing as it's useful. Okay. We can make plans and draw conclusions that are probabilistic in a sense that we're not so sure, but seems like the best odds are to, drink water, take your vitamins, right? Don't be a jerk. What's Google's motto? Don't be evil. Best odds strategies. Listen. So, but otherwise, what's the power of don't know? And then I want to relate that to refuge. Again, these days, wow, such tumult, such weirdness. What can we find refuge in? And of course, there is a sort of a knowing in what is reliable and trustworthy and a place of sanctuary, physical or particularly mental, and also interpersonal. There's a place for knowing what is for you, what are for you refuges, places of sanctuary and replenishment. It's really important. And one of them is to allow yourself not to always have to know. Right? That's a refuge. Classically in Buddhism, as I mentioned, I think earlier, we can take refuge in the Buddha as an historical teacher and also the innate Buddha nature in each of us. We can take refuge in the Dharma, reality itself, as well as credible accounts of what reality consists of, great teachings, in other words. And we can take refuge in the Sangha, the vertical dimension of those who are farther along the path that we are, and also the horizontal dimension of those fellow travelers that we can find community with here in the present. And so it's a really interesting combination to let yourself not know and kind of abide mentally before categorizing and liking or disliking. It's really quite something to connect that with the refuges that are real for you. Like if nature is for you a refuge, what's it like to walk down a path without categorizing what you're seeing? Without naming this and noting that and distinguishing this from that. Not knowing why you walk down the path. What might it be like to not know who you are? We tend to form all these identities, right? The nature of so much of our thought processes is in which a subjective I is witnessing a movie involving and objective me, right? So we're continually involved with little mental movies that are about a me who has certain qualities. So we know who that me is. We're writing them into that script, you know, that particular me. Well, what happens if you don't know who that me, you don't know so much. You let yourself not know so much about who or what that me is. Maybe that future me could be different, right? Maybe the me in your movies is a much better person than you normally script them as. What's that like? Right? Now, here's one in particular I want to finish with. When you're with people that you know, let's say friends, or lovers, or partners, or mates, what happens when you look at them with an attitude of not knowing, a beginner's mind? I find that incredibly helpful. Like with my wife and two kids, you know, to just look at them in the freshness of novelty, not knowing, like look at them and go, wow, what if I actually didn't know? What if I was like had a beginner's mind attitude about my wife of 43 years, who I know pretty well? What's that like for you? To bring that quality of not so sure, maybe so, don't know, to someone you know quite well. That's an incredible practice. And what's it like to bring that quality to someone who's difficult for you? Don't know. I find it really helpful because when we're, mad at someone or we feel hurt by them, we start forming views and we get attached to our views. They are a certain way, and then suffering begins from there. There's a place for seeing people clearly, but also there's a place for not being so sure and just not knowing. Don't know. Yeah. Often we ask ourselves, why? Why did that person cut me off? Why has that person ghosted me? Why did they somehow get mean? Why don't they still love me? Why? Right? And a lot we'll never know, or we'll never know for sure. And giving yourself the space and freedom to, like, I don't know why all that happened. I'm actually reminded of something that's very personal to me, which is I was involved with a tragic loss some years ago, partly because it's fairly private for other people too. I'll be a little general about this. So a tragic loss. Imagine, in other words, a situation that was complicated, but certainly you can look back for yourself and see mistakes you made. And including mistakes you made for crummy reasons. You're embarrassed about those reasons. You feel remorse. I do, about those reasons. Okay. We all have these, right? We all have mistakes that we feel bad about, and complicated situations that are irrevocable. You can't recover. There was a loss that was tragic related to, and you had a part in it, let's say. Okay. And it might even be a person who has really mistreated you, and it's really clear that 99% of what that what created that is not about you at all. But you have your 1%, maybe. Okay. It can be really liberating, which I'm experiencing right now, actually, to bring an attitude of, I don't know all that went into all that. I just don't know. I know a lot of what went into it. My part, their part, the roll of the dice. We caught a bad break that day. But I don't know all of it. I don't know. I don't know all of what led to that. Wow. Can you take refuge in that? I don't know all of what led to that. In them, in me, in reality, in the mysterious depths of the mind. I don't know. Wow. That's a kind of absolution for yourself. You're not, it's not a cheap fix. It's not a moral bypass or a spiritual bypass. It's just truth. I don't know all of what led to that. How's that feel? So, okay. So we explored here quite a lot. We explored really the value of not knowing and its place in personal practice, and then connected not knowing to some very interesting and cool neurology about the stream of attention moving from alerting to orienting to responding, which maps well to key aspects of ancient Buddhist psychology that takes a lot of what's going on in the mind into these different categories, including these three initial these categories in particular of bare perception, and then categorizing liking and disliking and other mental reactions to it. Wow. We related that to that processing stream, and realizing that the more that I rest in not knowing, and the more that I rest in the immediacy of the arising present moment, being alerted to it without trying to categorize it necessarily or control it when that's possible, that opens us out into a natural happiness. And then we were applying the refuge of not knowing to our personal relationships, including challenging ones.